Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. First of all, I would like to thank you for the Energy Week organizers for the invitation to moderate this panel that we'll have here, the discussion around biofuels, that is so important for energy transition purpose. It was exactly on this place that India and Brazil, between all the countries, this city, Delhi, formed in 2023, around 2 years ago, the Global Biofuels Alliance to promote the usage of biofuels, share of knowledge, certifications, and so on. And today I'll have here 6 friends, colleagues from the industry, and I would like them to introduce themselves, and then we can start the discussion. Please go ahead.
Hello, I'm sorry I'm losing my voice, but I think you can hear me okay. I'm Jennifer Holmgren, I'm the CEO of LanzaTech. We focus on recycling waste emissions from steel mills, from ferroalloy plants, as well as municipal solid waste and agri-residues to turn them into the products we use every day, from polyester to sustainable aviation fuel.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Shishir Joshipura. I'm the CEO and Managing Director for Praj Industries. We are a global leader in bioenergy space. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mahesh, Natarajan. Pleasure to be here in India Energy Week. I'm a Senior Vice President for Fuels and Low Carbon Technology in BP. And my group's accountability is providing technical support to our refineries in the fuels business and innovation across the bioenergy, hydrogen, value chain, and digital sciences. Thank you.
Good afternoon all. My name is Ashish Kumar. I'm heading the India business of VERBIO. VERBIO is a German biofuel producer. Just to give you an impression of the scale, so we are basically into 3 products: bioethanol, biodiesel, and biomethane. We are having global capacities of about 800,000 tons of bioethanol, 710,000 tons of biodiesel, and about 2 terawatt hours of biomethane production on energy terms. And we have also set up India's largest agri-residue-based biomethanation unit in Punjab.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Charlotte Morton. I'm the Chief Executive of the World Biogas Association, which is a founding member of the Global Biofuels Alliance. Our mission as an association is to facilitate the recycling of the 105 billion tons of organic waste we humans generate every year into valuable products that we need. In particular, since we're at India Energy Week, releasing the equivalent of 1/3 of today's fossil gas production in the form of green gas, biogas.
Hello everyone, I'm Vijay Nirani. I'm the founder and managing director for TruAlt Bioenergy. We are a young company focused on fast-tracking all that our panelists spoke of. We are into bioethanol, compressed biogas, soon into sustainable aviation fuel, and all kinds of biofuels. So that's me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for the introduction. The first question that I have here is related to feedstock. When you're thinking about and when you're speaking about the biofuels industry, feedstock has been kind of, let's say, a bottleneck. But you are in a place in a country that actually we have plenty of feedstocks. So, Jennifer, how can this country, India, can leverage its feedstock availability to provide market growth?
I think it's amazing how much the variety of feedstock here in India. When I think about agri-residues, municipal solid waste, and more importantly, a vision of doing local production so that you elevate and you create an entire ecosystem around where the feedstock is. Petroleum, as you know, is the densest liquid known to man. It's easy to take it to a central location and convert it. The future feedstocks are going to be distributed and they're going to be converted locally. India is rich, absolutely rich. Agriculture is such an important area here that agri-residues, forestry residues, and municipal solid waste, in addition to industrial waste, are going to be the future of how so many things are made here. So like I said, India is rich.
Okay, thank you. You touch also in a very important point related to the scale, especially when you compare the biofuels industry to the traditional oil and gas industry, for instance, because we know that most of the biofuels will be replacing the fossil fuels. In this sense, I would have a question for Mahesh that came, BP is a traditional oil and gas company and also has started to look into the biofuels industry. But there is this challenge related to, let's say, competitiveness and cost, and especially related to the scale. So how we can scale the biofuels business?
Thanks, Wesley. So firstly, biofuels is going to be a key player in decarbonization of the energy ecosystem. And biofuels demand is already here. And if you look at the bioenergy ecosystem, bioethanol, biogas, and sustainable aviation fuels all will play a key role in decarbonization of hard-to-abate sectors such as marine, aviation, and heavy-duty transportation. However, I see three key challenges around scaling up of biofuels, bioenergy broadly. So first one is access to feedstock, and Jennifer talked a bit about that. Second one is commercialization of advanced technologies. And thirdly, total cost of ownership. Biofuels fundamentally has lower carbon intensity. However, it's more expensive to produce as compared to fossil alternatives. And the reason for that is simply because the feedstock that we use to produce biofuels has oxygen content and has a relatively low hydrogen to carbon ratio, which requires hydrogen addition through hydroprocessing to convert that into a drop-in fuel. At the same time, the variety of feedstock is quite diverse, and it requires costly aggregation, segregation, and pretreatment for it to be converted into biofuels. Finally, multiple technologies are needed to scale up biofuels, and they're all in different cycles of advancement at this stage. So what are the solutions? So I think there are three solutions to help scale up bioenergy. First one is innovation, second one is partnerships, and third one is policy support. Technology innovation and partnerships are fundamental across the value chain, from feedstocks through to conversion technologies and into placing products in the market to enable the technology development to happen in novel feedstock development, in scaling up advanced technologies and bringing the cost of technology down, and bringing those and commercializing those technologies. Policy support is fundamentally needed to provide the framework for investors to have confidence to invest in the technology for long term. And that will enable a strong, robust, sustained policy will enable investment in bioenergy. And you can see that in a number of different areas already. There is renewable fuel standards in the US, the low carbon fuel standard in the US, the SATART scheme here in India, and these policies help scale up of bioenergy technology, and it will continue to propel bioenergy over the coming decades.
Perfect, thank you. So those three main elements that you mentioned in your speech, in your answer, is related to partnership, policies, and definitely innovation. And I would like we'll talk about later about policy and partnership, but for now, I would like to shift the discussion a little bit towards innovation and technology to ask Jennifer here. What are the innovations that you are more excited about? And how do you plan to maintain your leadership in this field?
I am actually very excited about the pragmatic approach that is being taken to diversify the feedstock pool. I think this is actually what the innovations are about. How do we efficiently convert feedstocks that were normally thrown away? CO2 from that is going up in the atmosphere. Like I said, industrial waste. I have to show you this because I think it's important. This is an on hat. It's their Clean Cloud connection. This is an Athleta shirt. Both of these, the polyester was made from a steel mill gas that was converted to ethanol. We captured it, we converted it, and then we gave it to IGL, Indian glycols, converted it ethanol to MEG, and then to polyester. You keep a lead by deploying, by de-risking the technology, by de-risking the market. And nobody ever imagined that you would recycle a carbon emission and convert it to a product. 10 years ago, nobody talked about the circular carbon economy. Today, I've got a product in my hand. And so this is how we keep an advantage. But my goal in life is not to have an advantage. My goal and what I see as the future is everybody's solution being successful, because we're not competing against each other. We're competing in creating a new carbon economy that elevates everybody's way of life, that brings solutions to people that don't have them, using local resources.
Thank you. Thank you. A new carbon economy as well. You bring this very important element of the sustainability, that when we're talking about sustainability, we need to talk about circularity. Thank you for showing this very good cap as well. Okay, so my next question is for Ashish. I would like you to elaborate a little bit more on how this biofuels industry will play a role with regards to the energy transition in the road and aviation transportation.
Right. So I think the primary trigger for this discussion would be ultimately, if we have to meet the net zero emission targets 2050 each, and those targets can be met only when each stakeholder or each particular sector is able to perform up to the targets which have been set, which basically means that unless biofuel plays its role, those net zero emission targets cannot be met. And let's put some numbers over here so just to get the context clear. So let's say roughly we are today at about 57 to 60 gigatons of CO2 equivalent emissions, what we have today. And to meet that 1.5 degree target, we need to bring down these emissions to about 8 gigatons. So we need to come down from roughly 60 to 8. And assuming that all the current policies and the NDCs and the pledges what have been made, even after complying to all of that, we will reach about 19, which basically means that there's going to be a shortfall of 11 still going to be there, despite of compliance to all these targets. Now, within this context, we need to understand where the biofuels is today, which is, let's say, if I take the example of road transportation, I mean, overall transport accounts for about 15% contribution to these emissions. Today, the biofuels penetration, globally speaking, is at about 4%, 4.5%, 5% max. And this has to go up to more than 60% so that this net zero emission target can be met. So I think the answer is that without compliance to the biofuel, actual achievement of these targets, the overall picture cannot be met. So that is one. Second, if we look into, I think you asked specific to aviation and the road transport. I would probably comment first on the road transport part of it. I mean, maybe we look at it in a very simplistic manner. I think it is, although, let's say the passenger cars, the car segment will ultimately start moving towards the electrification part of it. Whereas the long haul, the heavy trucking, I think that is where the gasification needs to actually, evolve to. And China is a good example over here, wherein 35% of the trucking is happening on LNG today. So I think this is a good, scenario which eventually can be imagined to be replicated worldwide. So gasification in the road transport, of course, will be a big push. On the aviation side, I don't really have any concerns on the technology part of it. I think it is more of the commercialization, because I think SAF is just too expensive. to put it very simply and bluntly. So I don't know, under the given context and the given commercial conditions what we have, I would say it needs a lot of corrections, a better commercial framework for these new technologies to actually stand on its own.
Perfect, thank you. We are introduced here to a very important word in this context of sustainability and energy transition by Jennifer, that is circularity. And the biofuels industry is somehow related to circularity as well. When we produce, for instance, biodiesel, renewable diesel, and SAF from UCO or from palm. But there are also other concerns that we need to keep in mind, and it was said by Ashish as well, it's related to power generation. And in this context, we have another option that just, let's say, that start to rise here and start to be like a very developing as well, that is biogas. So I would like to ask you to Charlotte, if you can elaborate a little bit more on the role of biogas, the role that the biogas will play in the energy transition, in which stage it is today, not only with regard to technology development, but as well related to commercialization and also to the production by itself, and what would be the role that biogas will play in this full picture of the energy transition?
Sure. Well, biogas is a very interesting fuel, and I think the most important thing to start with is to think about the fact that it is generated in the most part from organic waste, as I mentioned at the beginning, and it is also, as a form of energy, incredibly flexible. So when we want to talk about where we're going to be using biogas, it can be used in all sorts of things. It can be upgraded to biomethane for heat. For heat. As biogas itself, it can be generated to create power. It can go into shipping and aviation fuel, and it can be converted into all sorts of other forms as well. So the most important thing to think about is how are we going to make it happen? It's absolutely critical we make it happen, because what we're talking about is recycling all of those organic wastes that are creating a very critical problem for us all. If they're not collected, they are polluting our rivers and oceans, and they're emitting methane, which you're all aware is 86 times more potent to greenhouse gas than CO2. So the state of our oceans is incredibly serious. And we've already identified, as under the Global Methane Pledge, that reducing methane emissions is one of the fastest ways to keep temperatures down. So we need to do it. We know there is enormous value in all of those organic wastes. I talked about the volume of biogas we're talking about is around 1/3 of today's fossil gas demand today. So there's a lot of energy in there, but it's also a lot of other valuable products, bio-CO2, biofertilizers that can displace chemical fertilizers. And it's an enormous economic opportunity. So there's enormous reasons for us to do it, because it's so exciting economically and it's critically essential. The challenge is, how do we do it? And the reason this is a challenge is because all those organic wastes are produced by and controlled by a whole range of stakeholders. And then once we start being in a position to collect them, we then need to think about where the energy is going and where the fertilizer is going, which requires a whole host of other stakeholders to be involved in that process. So fundamentally, this is about a circular economy technology. And in order for us to make it happen, we need to bring all of those stakeholders together, find a way to do that, and to get all of their interests aligned so that they can play their part in making it happen. And as the moderator of the opening panel yesterday said, the transition's happening, but you just need the right regulatory framework. So in addition to getting everybody's interests aligned, we need the right regulatory framework on the ground, and we need to ensure that the industry itself is setting minimum standards in growing sustainably, safely, and professionally, so that it's high performing and returning the level of return to investors that they expect. So that's the challenge, and we have developed, to help with this process, a standardized model global biogas regulatory framework, which includes all the policies, standards, and regulations that the industry needs, as well as an international AD certification scheme, which sets those minimum standards for the design, build, and operation of plants. that is available to any government state to look at in terms of taking best practice examples from other countries who've also helping to avoid some of the mistakes that those other countries have made. But then it's about bringing all of those stakeholders together and getting everybody aligned on the vision of what is possible with this, with the opportunity here to as far as biogas is concerned, getting people excited about it, and then aligning their interests and understanding how we can solve the challenges today, and then putting in place an action plan to ensure that we can deliver it, including modeling the supply chain requirements and the capacity building necessary. But if we can do all of that, and I do believe it's possible, then we would have an exceedingly exciting economic opportunity that helps solve those critical problems that we're facing today as well.
Thank you for sharing this perspective. Definitely, it's very important to take into account the supply chain, especially because biogas, we do have, let's say, the feedstock, but the production of biogas would be very localized in this sense. I like to think as well at the same time when I think about biofuels in general, beyond the economic and the environmental benefits that came from it, and also try to include in, let's say, this equation, the social benefits. In this sense, I would like to ask you to Vijay, what are, let's say, the economic and social benefits with regards to job creation and also to community development when you go to, let's say, to a place and produce biofuels there?
Thank you so much, Wesley. I must say there is a lot of nobility attached to biofuels in general, right? To give you a case for example of our group or our companies alone, we traditionally belong to the sugar industry. And we cater to close to 3,500 farmer families that are directly dependent on our group for supply of their produce, that's sugarcane. Now, we got a very beautiful policy, the Satat scheme and the ethanol blended with petrol program. This simply transformed these sugar industries into biorefineries, and we could create an opportunity for the farmers to get their payments realized much quicker and help the farmer get an additional revenue that went into his pocket. See, not just on the social benefit, also the local economy for the country. To give you perspective, one policy of blending ethanol with petrol created a saving of close to $14 billion on import of crude. That's because we substituted close to $14 billion worth of crude. And what's more interesting is out of this $14 billion, close to 70% of it being the cost of raw material, that is your agricultural import, close to about $9 to $10 billion out of it went into the farmer's pocket as additional revenue. So that's a tremendous opportunity that biofuels in general is creating for a country that is an agrarian economy like India, especially for a country like India. So we have close to 35% of our population comes from the farming communities. And advancement of the policies to better improve the adoption of biofuels will only create an additional revenue to the farmer, substituting of import to the country, and substitution of carbon emissions with indigenously made more cleaner fuels. This also has led to creating, so for example, TruAlt Bioenergy ended up, we've got a history of 2 years. We have close to 1,800 people that we created employment for. And if you see the allied employment, again, there is a tremendous amount of allied benefits that biofuels are creating. Of course, I do beg to differ on this fact that biofuels may be a little expensive to begin with, but put it in comparison with wind or solar, right? Just 10 years ago, we paid close to 15 Indian rupees per unit of power. To today, it's the cheapest source of power. We pay less than 2 to 3 rupees. That's almost less than 7-8 times the cost of what we paid just 10 years ago. Same will be the story of biofuels, and as Charlotte mentioned, we need the right policy and the framework in place for us to better improve the adoption, create value for the entire ecosystem, and of course, make the planet more greener.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing this perspective of the relevance of the biofuels, not only related to the energy transition and carbon emissions reduction, but all those benefits that can generate, for instance, in a country such as India, to the farmers. I would say that it's pretty much the same in Brazil. There is these discussions in some part of the world when you compare food versus fuel, use of land, but I don't think it will be applied to countries such as Brazil and India. The effect of the biofuels production is totally the opposite in this sense, because it's not only helped the planet, but also it has been helping to develop local communities, especially farming communities. My next question would be to Shishir. If you can also share your view about the role of the biofuels in the energy transition in, because it's so difficult to scale up this business, and it was said by Vijay as well, a great example that actually once we scale up the wind and solar industry, it has become somehow competitive with regards to the price. But if you can share your view around this role of biofuels in the energy transition, and also what are the technologies that you are more excited about to help to scale up this business?
So I'll build on the point that Vijay was making about the fact that biofuels have a very large impact and on multiple sections of the society, whether we look at it from an environmental perspective, social perspective, economic perspective. I think it's transformative for agrarian economies. For too long, not with any, and with good results, except one, we have all dependent on a form of energy that has helped us come to where we are today. So I don't think fossil fuel is the energy, is the enemy here. The enemy is the after effect of carbon dioxide or methane that gets associated, and that we continue to use it because we never understood this impact, but of course there is no more a debate on that anymore. Having said that, if we focus on what comes from above the ground, and that's a very simple definition I want to give, carbon that comes from below the ground is the enemy if we don't know how to capture it. What carbon comes from above the ground is a transition that we all need to make, and biofuels play a very, very large role in making the carbon above the ground a transition bridge to our eventual energy position of the world, maybe in 2040, 50, whenever we have a hydrogen driven economies across the world in a uniform sort of way. Because there the ecosystem is far from developed. We've seen in India two programs that get launched almost simultaneously, one on EBP20, which was 20% blending of ethanol. Stupendous success. We have actually, we joke among ourselves many times that one of the few programs launched by the government that is actually running ahead of its time on its goals. So it's actually doing much better than what was envisaged. And that happened because there was a complete cohesion between the policy, government, ecosystem, industry, the users, everyone. At the same time, we had also launched a very ambitious program that was mentioned, Satat. It didn't meet the same success as of date. It faced different challenges, and there, I think India is not a gas economy. We quickly realized that our ecosystem needs to undergo a significant change. Our policy environment has to change. Even our offtake mechanisms, how do we reach the molecule in the hands of the end user? Many of those dimensions, the co-product management, many of the things that we were not ready for. So they have slowed down, but now we've sort of come to a situation where we say, okay, we know what to do and we are moving forward on that plan. So maybe the next decade will be for Satat to succeed. I believe strongly biofuels have a strong role to play in becoming the bridge to tomorrow. We are at a stage of using fossil energy in our daily lifestyles, which we cannot do away with. If we have to transit to a low carbon dioxide, hopefully not climate reversing, but arresting the further climate deterioration, policy, environment, and practices as humanity, I think biofuels have a very, very important role to play, because there is no binary situation of a 0 or 1 that, okay, here is fossil fuel, tomorrow onwards you switch to hydrogen and everything is good. No. We need to transit this pathway. It's a change. And I strongly believe that any change or transition has a very high cost to pay in immediate term. And that high cost must then, as my co-panelists are saying, must be mitigated through a host of efforts, starting with policy, government support, regulatory support, innovation, and so on. Thank you.
Definitely. The energy industry at all has this characteristic of being, let's say, very asset intensive, capital intensive industry requiring a lot of capex. So in this sense, as much as we can have the stability related to the governments that need somehow, let me use the word that was used by Mahesh before, partnership, because in this sense the role of governments, so when they define policies, regulations, or the framework is multifaceted. The government has responsibility to provide taxation, as well as to provide even funds, sometimes through development banks. So I would like to ask you, Mahesh, if we have something that is missing here with related to regulations and policies, or what are the governments, what that actually they can do to provide, let's say, a more stable and lower risk related to that, because as we can see, for instance, with some biofuels in United States, now there is a discussion around how to evolve, because no one knows, no one has a clear picture on what will happen, and it has been, let's say, jeopardized some investments, for instance. What are your views on that, Mahesh, with relate to regulation and policy, and how it can be, like, government in this sense can partner with the biofuels industry at all to help to promote the development needed?
Yeah, thanks, Wesley. So, I guess before I kind of get to that question specifically, maybe one thing I'll mention: modern bioenergy will grow, right? And BP publishes Energy Outlook every year, and in BP's Energy Outlook, we see modern bioenergy kind of nearly tripling by 2050, and it'll play a key role. Multiple feedstocks and multiple technologies are needed to scale up this modern bioenergy. There isn't one single solution that sort of will get us there, right? So you will need multiple feedstocks, access to multiple technology, development of novel feedstocks, and commercialization of many advanced technologies to get there. So if you kind of look at how the transition to this 2050 will happen, it'll happen in two parts. Firstly, there are a number of proven technologies that exist today for which there is fundamental policy support that's also in place. And at first, I see some of these technologies scale up across the globe. So take a few examples. The first one is HEFA production. Co-processing of fatty oils and greases it produces biodiesel and sustainable aviation fuels. Standalone processing of exactly the same feedstock, fatty oils and greases, will help scale up biodistillates, which basically include biodiesel and sustainable aviation fuels in the near term. BP already produces more than 7,000 barrels per day of biodiesel and sustainable aviation fuel through co-processing. The second area is first generation ethanol production. Brazil's already leading in that. So there's going to be significant continued growth of bioethanol from sugarcane in India and Brazil, and from corn in the US. And BP are second largest bioethanol producer in Brazil today. The third one is biogas, which has been mentioned a number of times, and it's really going to be critical to grow biogas. And based on BP's Energy Outlook again, we see a 10-fold growth in biogas demand by 2040 and a 20-fold growth of biogas by 2050. And through the acquisition of Archaea Energy in the US, BP are already the largest biogas producer. So if you look at all of these existing products that we have in play, they're all supported through a strong fundamental foundation of regulatory policy, but also investment in technology, as I said. So you look at US, you've got renewable fuel standards, low carbon fuel standards in California, and they kind of support that biogas growth. We talked about SATAT here in India, and that'll primarily drive some of the biogas growth here as well. If I look into the future, you need, once we exhaust the existing feedstock that's available, we will need to move into novel feedstocks and advanced technologies. And within this sphere, you have alcohol to jet, which is basically taking alcohol both in the form of ethanol and methanol, and converting that into sustainable aviation fuels through a dehydration and oligomerization process. E-fuels will come into the future, which is basically taking green hydrogen and combining with CO2 and producing sustainable aviation fuels through either Fischer-Tropsch reaction or through methanol synthesis. So these are the advanced technologies that will come in the future. And the other one that will potentially come in the future is second generation ethanol through lignocellulosic feedstock. So these are kind of the evolving advanced technologies in the future. And going back to your question, a strong framework of policy and a sustained framework of policy will help commercialize these technologies in the future. And that's kind of what we want to see here in India, but also in Brazil. And actually in India, there is a lot of biomass available. There's nearly 750 million tons of biomass available. And it's that, therefore, India is an exciting country from a bioenergy perspective. And a strong policy framework like the ethanol blending for 20% ethanol blending in gasoline, or the SATAT scheme, will help scale up bioenergy in India. And actually, I do believe that India has the potential to be one of the fastest growing bioenergy nation in the world through access of that biomass.
Perfect, thanks. Let me leverage your answer to ask to Charlotte how it would be. You shared about in your first answer about the framework, also the roadmap that would be needed to help to increase the biogas production. And what will be the role of the government here with related to policy and regulation? What can be done to further to take this biogas production even to a further level?
Well, they have an essential role to play, as do state governments. Policies, standards, regulations come from government ultimately, and state governments. So their role is very much to collaborate, different government departments to collaborate with each other. One of the challenges of a circular economy technology is that different parts of the regulatory framework belong to different government departments, and government departments in most countries don't talk to each other. So it's not unusual, and so it's really important to find a way to bring not only the industry stakeholders together, with which typically stakeholders that are not used to talking to each other, as well as all of those government departments, which is why my suggestion of developing a roadmap together is the best way to ensure that the right regulatory framework can be put in place and that all stakeholders' interests are aligned. I mean, I think you talked about the benefits to farmers, and there absolutely are benefits, but if it's not done in the right way, they won't be perceived by farmers to be benefiting them. And I think I remember seeing something in the press with some farmers objecting to paddy straw being digested, which is a shame, because it's really essential from even the health of residents of Delhi to ensure that they're not burnt, they're digested from an air quality perspective. So yeah, absolutely, government has a very role to play. It requires a lot of openness amongst everybody, all stakeholders, to engage with each other and understand everybody's role. And I think the most important thing is, or the most important way to make that happen is to get everybody united behind the opportunity, because it is a very exciting opportunity. But we won't make it happen unless we all come together and agree how.
Oh, thank you. I like this view on how we need to engage all the main stakeholders and also try to find, let's say, some convergence points. We had a great example in Brazil, and I like to share this. because I think perhaps in the country we have been using E100. We don't call that E100 in Brazil because for us it's so common to fill the fleet at least for 30, 40 years. And actually around 50 to 6 years ago, we had a program in the country that was called back then Pro Alcohol in Portuguese, but it will be similar to Pro Alcohol. And what's interesting about this Pro Alcohol, when you talk to someone that was there or it was impacted by this government program, everyone will say this was a very good example when every kind of player, every stakeholder, government, producers, even university, they came together and they agreed that for the country it would be better to have these incentives to make the production of ethanol. And also back then, the concern was not related to energy transition, of course, 6 years ago, but it's a great example that the society as a whole agreed, and the main push back then was the energy security. That is also another element that's important to take into account when you're talking about energy. And also we know that with all these alignments, this convergence, it's in a way when you have like a stable regulations, as was said before here, it is in a way to minimize the risks. And I would like to ask here to, Shishir from Praj, how you can see or what would be the ways in which the industry as a whole can help minimize the risks when we have these ongoing and new regulations all the time?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. As I said, it's very simple for us to say that everything resides on the policy and the regulation side. But I think as industry, we also have a very important role to play in advancing biofuels. And I think innovation is the one big lever that we can use to a great effect. One of the things that we have learned, we are a technology company, we are developing these different feedstocks to different molecules, solutions. One of the things that we recognized was that I have a choice to make. I can complain about the fact that, oh, second generation technology that you talked about, we are commissioning 3 projects right now 100 miles north of here that will use rice straw and convert that to ethanol. And then say, I need support, I only need money. So one question that we ask is saying, all right, maybe first project we need support. But if we continually need support, then it's not sustainable. So we need to get onto our own feet. And how do we do that? Using innovation. And that's when our team started to focus very differently. And we said, when we are processing biomass, there is an end molecule that we have inside. But as we start processing, we come up with various streams that are byproduct streams, the co-product stream. What can we do to valorize those streams? Where can we use innovation to actually make this happen? And we recognize that and I'll give a very simple examples that will connect back to what Charlotte was saying. So when we use rice straw and say make RNG, CBG as we call it in India, biogas, one of the byproducts comes is a solid fertilizer, right? In the solid liquid separation system, post gas production, you get solid fertilizer. The typical price in India that you realize is 4 rupees a kilo. That's the price that you get. And there are associated headaches of trying to dispose of fertilizer. It's not easy. The retail networks are far and few in between. Our scientists, my team took the fertilizer and we said, this is lignin rich. How do I convert this to something else? And then we converted that to biobitumen. And suddenly from 4 rupees a kilo, this is now 45 rupees a kilo product. India imports half its bitumen. And this directly goes and substitutes. We built our first road 2 years ago, along with Shell in India. It had to undergo 2 years of test. It passed. There's the law of the land. But now we built the new national highway section, which was inaugurated 3 weeks ago by the minister. The point I'm trying to make is, we suddenly shifted the financial viability of biogas projects in India with one innovation. There are multiple of these innovations. The same thing applies to a 2G ethanol plant. There's a lot of lignin that gets separated. What do we do with it? And so on. So innovation has a very, very large role to play in making things viable. I think that's one clear. The second part that I see is, The biofuel space is also calling for a lot more increased collaboration across the global boundaries. We can't just sit within our own sort of small premise and say this applies to me and this is what I will do. I think there's a lot of lessons that we can exchange and learn. We learned a lot from Brazil. We can give it back, part of what we have learned. The point is that collaboration and working together is the way forward, because a change will not happen with one agent working alone. It is going to happen because all of us, as was being said, align to a common cause. So there's a second step that I say. The third important leg, and I'll keep this short, is finally we need to wake up to the reality that this will call for a lot of financing and funding being made available to these projects. In absence of viable funding and financing mechanisms, we are chasing a mirage. We all know, sorry for making this statement to this group, because you are probably not the part of that group, but whatever we do, we are going to miss the 2030 targets. As a humanity, we are not going to meet the targets we set for ourselves. It's a fact. What can we do? Somebody said a very beautiful statement in my earlier meeting. They said, the ton of CO2 that we don't save today, remember that tomorrow it has to be 2 tons for the same impact. And I think if we recognize this, then we need to align the policy, technology, funding, all three, and across the geographies, not only in one given geography. And I think we'll have a solution.
Perfect, thank you. Let me take on that to ask Vijay, with different technology options as well as business model, commercialization ways, what to produce, where to produce, how to ensure the best capital allocation in a way that can bring the investment return to a higher level, as well as while minimizing the risks associated with.
Thank you so much. So I'll begin that by first complimenting Mr. Shishir and his team at Praj. So they have been catapulting the technologies for us, companies like us, to be able to forward integrate the different carbohydrates into hydrocarbons, right? So we have, as a country, a lot of raw material. It's more than enough for our own consumption. We also can supply to the world different kinds of biofuels. Now, for us to be able to do that is to have a cost-efficient technology, and of course, Praj is doing a great work in that. Almost every other day, we find a new innovation that comes from their stables, and we get super excited. So the whole point of us getting into the transition, I very strongly believe that it is still very much possible. And a slight differ on what Mr. Shishir just said right now is, of course, we are very challenged on achieving our targets currently, but with the right policies in place, we already have great minds like Mr. Shishir himself and his team there on how well we can build the technology, right? There's so many, Jennifer was here, so she's been into developing different kinds of technology for the globe, and there are great companies doing phenomenal things. For example, BP, also being one of the largest sugar manufacturer in Brazil, has great deal of involvement with biofuels, not just fossil fuels. So my take on this would be only and only on the right policies. Again, when we speak on cost-effective technologies, I will say that when you try to put value to the feedstock, that is absolute waste, right? Which we're trying to create value from. Now, there is no real value to it. For example, in our case, now we are making 1G ethanol. In that, we have a lot of spent wash or vinasse that comes out. So what we are doing is we are converting that spent wash into biogas. So if you try to ask me what the real cost of spent wash is, I don't know if it's the right podium to say it's zero. I would rather say I spent money to handle it. So from spending maybe 2 rupees or 3 rupees a liter to handle the spent wash that comes out of making ethanol, to today we are making close to 74 rupees a kg of gas produced from it. The beauty is the residual waste is also packed and sold as organic biopotash. It gives huge value to the spent waste that is coming in as waste. Now, if you were to ask what the real cost of this technology is, I would say in terms of operating expenses, it's negligible to, I mean, the only objective for us is to keep building on the opportunity that we have, take in the right technology, and of course, it is there to, I would say, abuse to great extent. Now, it's only for the first few participants in the biofuel space that will end up spending expensive on building these first few projects. But again, like Mr. Joshipura said, the government is there to support us, give some capital subsidies. There are beautiful policies already which we can build on. Now, for example, on the sustainable aviation fuel, ethanol getting converted into SAF, Government of India has a phenomenal policy. Each states in India, for example, the Andhra Pradesh government has a very interesting policy where you get close to 35 to 40% of, again, it's subjective of your cost of project, but close to 35 to 40% of your capex is being offset by subsidies. That you're not going to get anywhere. And if you want to be the first player, you have these beautiful benefits available already. And in the ethanol space, it's only because of one policy on the interest subvention that everybody jumped on the opportunity and built up the capacities that we see today. So if you ask me, taking in absolute waste, right from biomass to agricultural waste to your damaged food grains to your industrial effluents, all of these end up giving so many of products by simple tweaking on, maybe the catalytic process or the scrubbing of the impurities and getting the right hydrocarbons from them. It is very much possible. It is very much here. The only objective for us, like our earlier panelist rightly said, we are not competing between fossil or any other fuels. We are here to coexist. We are here to create an opportunity for the consumer to buy the cheapest available fuel that he requires. Forget the noble cause of being carbon neutral or reducing the carbon impact. Maybe if people are very cost sensitive today, we might be the cheapest fuel available if we have the right scales at play. And that we're going to get to that only when technology is used to the right extent. And I must give great compliments again to technology providers like Praj or say LanzaTech or Jennifer, what all of them are doing. It's phenomenal what they're doing. It's helping not just companies like TruAlt, but the 350,000 farmers that we are dealing with, right? So it's a great opportunity for us to keep building on this.
Perfect, thank you. Let me ask you now to Ashish, how you are looking to the future, how you are thinking to build your supply chain to be able to adapt to a new business model, new opportunities of, for instance, exporting biofuels or to new ways of commercializing biofuels?
Right, so before I answer that, I'd just like to make a comment because quite often there are parallels drawn between biofuels and how solar and wind has come up. Biofuels are expensive and they will stay expensive. We should not draw parallels the way solar or wind has gone down from a pricing standpoint. And the reason I say that is, in case of solar wind, the capex is about 80-90%. Whereas in case of biofuels, the capex is just about 30-40%. So, and I'm making this point because policymakers are listening here, so they should not have an impression that the pricing is going to go down or suddenly biofuels are going to start looking very attractive. But now coming to your question, so the supply chains, and I'll take the example of what we have done in India. We have set up a biogas CBG plant in Punjab. We are directly working with roughly about 1,500 to 2,000 farmers directly. We are sourcing the feedstock. We are owning and operating the complete supply chain on our own. It's not out of choice, but it is out of the context we are in, that it's a nascent market and it's going to take a while, wherein the quality sensitization is going to be it's going to be penetrated into the market. The feedstock quality is of utmost importance to get really the right yields. And I'm talking specific to agri-residue plants. I'm not talking about pressed mud or MSW. I'm just talking about agri-residue. So at the moment, we are working directly with these farmers. And we are also implementing the circularity. I mean, we did, I think Shishir mentioned about the manure which comes out of the process. So we are implementing circularity in the sense that the manure is going back to the same farmers where the feedstock came from. So last year we dispersed roughly about 40,000 tons of manure in a period of 2.5 months. So that is the scale we are talking about. And we don't see that this supply chain model is going to look very different for large industrial scale plants. You will have to roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty, and do it on your own to a large extent, because the moment you start involving a lot of intermediaries, at least within the existing commercial framework, there is no business case. Let's accept that. So the supply chains need to be implemented, one from the upstream point of view and also on the downstream. The FOM is a downstream product. And in the current context, wherein we do not really also have a gas grid infrastructure existing in the country, and again specific to India, so you also have to build a supply chain, a forward supply chain for bringing the gas to the retail, or in some cases also bringing the gas to the injection point, because the grid is not coming to you, so you have to go to the grid, right? So this is again specific to India. These are the topics one has to deal with. So at least in the next couple of years, with these policies, which are, I would say, still on paper, once they are coming into an action mode, when we have policies like the direct pipeline injection and a better monetization of the manure, or with the introduction of CBG blending obligations coming into play, I think this will start looking in a better light.
Okay, thank you very much. Just for the sake of the time, I would like to thank you all for being here and to listen us at this point. And I would like also to thank you for the fellow panelists here, Shishir, Mahesh, Ashish, Charlotte, and Vijay for being here with us in this wonderful discussion. So thank you all.